Hello everybody, welcome to Founders for School digital events where we feature Masters of Business who tell their career story, and we invite the audience, which is comprised of students and young people who are beaming this webinar into this webinar from up and down the country to ask questions. My name is Alison Rowan McEwan. I am an engagement manager for Founders for School and I will be hosting the session today. Our hope is by sharing insights, career guidance, lessons and tips to motivate and inspire, we hope to support the young people out there to make some informed decisions about their future, which, particularly given the current situation, is ever more important. To the audience, your audio, video and chat function has been disabled for safeguarding purposes because we have a wide range of people. Some young people are under the age where they can say it's okay to be on a webinar. So you will see us speaking, but you are very, very welcome to ask questions. You do have the choice, however, of making yourself anonymous when you're asking questions if you just go to your bar, which will probably either be at the bottom or the top of your screen, and just click the wee switch when you're doing your questions. We are recording the session and it will be featured on our YouTube channel in due course, so just sit back and enjoy the webinar and make as many notes as you can. And like I said, questions are always welcome. So today's Master of Business is Dan Strang, CEO and co-founder of EventsTag, and we are Interact. Dan, first of all, let me thank you for giving your time today and agreeing to share your story. Just for everybody watching, this particular type of event is a kind of a role model career event. It's essentially a time for Dan to tell a story about his career journey, about what inspired them to their chosen career path, what kind of impacts or the really important lessons he got from it, and what they enjoy most about what they do, why he does it, essentially. The hope is these events will help prepare you for the world of work. It will give you a bit of insight and it will help you understand some of the skills which are important in the workplace, such as resilience, conflict resolution. I don't want to put words into Dan's mouth because he will tell us the ones that he finds are most important to him. So Dan is going to speak for about 7-10 minutes and hopefully that will spark some questions from everybody, and then we'll go into the question and answer session. So Dan, it's over to you. Tell us about your career, please.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for having me here. It's really nice to be able to speak to you guys, and hopefully some of my story will help with your kind of future choices and future thoughts about business. I'm happy to answer and talk through kind of any questions that you might have at the end. But I'm just going to give you a bit of a rundown of how I got involved and what I've been doing over the last 10 years or so. So I've always been interested in running businesses from a very, very early age. I kind of naturally progressed to selling things at school and opening up kind of little enterprises even when I was sort of 5 or 6 years old. So the first thing I was always doing was illegally selling sweets at school, and I'm not recommending that any of you kind of go into that business, but it was my first sort of real kind of business. And actually through that I ended up making an acquisition. So teachers kind of pulled me aside and said, look Dan, you can't be selling food at school. And I said, look, I actually think that the way that I'm kind of supplying food is actually better than what you're doing in the kind of school tuck shop, and I could kind of run it a bit more efficiently for you and I'll give you a revenue share. This is when I was 14. So the school said yes, and they said that they would happily kind of let me take over the tuck shop. So I bought out the tuck shop from the school and I paid them a revenue share, and I employed other people in school to sell food through the school tuck shop. But I was kind of going through education, actually one of the things, and this is why I'm really passionate about kind of Founders for School, is that you actually don't get a huge amount of insight into business. You get quite a lot of kind of practical information around sort of school studies, but actually not too much insight into business. And the natural progression was to go into university and to go through a career through a kind of grad scheme, because that's what everybody else did. So I did that, and I set up a couple of other kind of little businesses along the way. But after I kind of went to university and I came out, I went into a grad scheme at Adidas. I did about 1.5 years work there, and I realized that actually all I really wanted to do was go and run my own business. So I left Adidas, set up my first business in fashion. I'd got a bit of experience from Adidas, so I knew a little bit about kind of supplying clothes, and my parents were in the fashion trade, so I had some knowledge there. And my first business was trying to get lots of different independent fashion stores around the country to buy into the same piece of clothing, so a shirt made out in India. It would then get brought back to the UK, and it would be rebranded for each one of those in each individual stores. So they got the buying power of kind of a multiple, because there was 10, 20 of them together, but they also had their own individual range that a guy in Newcastle would sell, but also a guy in London would sell, but it would all have their own brand on it. And it was a really nice concept, but an incredibly hard business to run, because I was dealing with factories out in India and China, which were hard to communicate with and hard to kind of put structure and process in place with. And then I was dealing with very, very small sort of boutiques in the UK that had cash flow issues and were kind of struggling to be able to pay for some of their stuff. So that was really hard, but I ended up managing to sell that to New Look, because they were really interested in the concept, and they kind of wanted to get involved in supplying stores at the moment. So it was a great kind of turnaround in a short space of time. And then said to New Look, I had nothing to do, so I said to the guy at New Look, I was like, what do you need? What are you looking for? And they said, well, we'd love to have some celebrity inspired fashion ranges. Can you do that? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I had no kind of contacts in celebrities, and never kind of designed any clothing. I was just sort of putting together kind of suppliers and buyers in the last business. But I said, okay, fine. So I started calling up celebrities' agents and saying, look, I've got New Look, can I do a fashion range for you? And got loads of responses. I had spent about 3 months having lunches with sort of Z-list celebrities. So from kind of Anton Deck, who's not a Z-list, Anton Deck's pretty good, that was a top level. But down to Gavin Henson, who might be a bit too old for some of you guys. But there was a range of celebrities, and ended up kind of brokering a deal between New Look and Vernon Kay to do a fashion range for them. But that wasn't really taking up a huge amount of time. And I said, look, what I want to do is I want to build a scalable business for the future. So I wanted to get involved in technology. So I thought up a load of my own ideas, and I also started going to lots of kind of technology meetups to try and find somebody who could actually write some code, somebody cleverer than me who could actually kind of build some of the ideas that I came up with. And I found this guy who'd had this idea himself, and he was a technology developer. He'd spent the last 20 years building websites for Harrods and those type of people, so really advanced. And he said, look, I've got this idea. There's this new up and coming app called Instagram. And I was like, I've never heard of that, but that sounds like it might be something that gets popular. And what we can do is we can take Instagram photos from a hashtag and put them up onto big screens at events. And that will help people like weddings or people who are kind of running weddings, who used to have these old-fashioned disposable cameras on wedding tables, and they would be kind of sort of spinning the camera, taking photos. So this was back in sort of 2010, and we thought, right, let's try and replace those with this new up-and-coming Instagram app. So it was about 2012. We kind of launched the business and got a huge response. We had tens of thousands of brides all over the world start to use our free product or a kind of small paid version of it. But actually, we knew we were never going to build a big revenue stream from brides and grooms kind of using it on a 20 quid, 30 quid sort of basis. And selling technology to consumers is pretty hard. Most consumer technology is really sort of free, and you get kind of great technology for free, so it's very difficult to sell that. So we thought, okay, we could apply it to brands. So we started selling it to sports stadiums and music festivals, and that's my current business, EventsTag. So over the last 7 years, we've built that up from just two people, Ollie and I, the guy we founded the business with, kind of from the wedding side, up to I'll tell you 2 months ago what we had as a business, not now, but 2 months ago, having kind of 30 people in 4 different countries selling our technology. So the business is now called EventsTag. it sells all different types of experiential technology. So experiential is when brands sponsor big events. So normally things like music festivals or sports stadiums. So if you go to a big rugby game in Twickenham, for example, you'll see lots of brands outside of the game kind of having little fan zones and little kind of areas. So we sell technology for that, and that would be sort of photo booths and photo experiences, so you can take away a really nice branded photography piece of you. Things like seeing your Instagram photos on big screens, some games. So outside Twickenham, we've got some quite like games where you throw rugby balls and we see how quickly you're throwing the rugby ball and how many times you get it through the hoops, and then you can win flights around the world with British Airways. So that's been a really exciting journey. We started off with just a few customers, and we realized we needed some investment. So we went out and found an investor, which was a tech accelerator. So there's lots and lots of different opportunities for kind of funding tech businesses out there. We went through this tech accelerator route, which was a company called Wyra. We got some investment for around £50,000 to kind of kickstart and launch the product, and they took about 5% of equity. Okay. And then they kind of introduce you to another sort of further investors. Their goal is really to help businesses build an initial product, get a few customers, and then introduce you to another investor. So then we got some investment round for the next few years from a company called Mercia Technologies, who are a venture capitalist. They again invested in us in return for equity, and that allowed us to continue to grow, open our offices in the US, and continue to launch more products. And now we're sort of, again, until earlier this year, sort of a bit more self-sustainable and kind of profitable for the last couple of years, opened some new markets into things like theme parks and attractions. And yeah, I think I've kind of run through probably about my 10 minutes. I was going to talk a little bit about some of the coronavirus challenges, if that's of interest.
Actually, I think it would be. I'll give you another couple of minutes then. That's absolutely fine. We do have some questions, but I think that's very relevant. So,
cool. So we built up this. So we spent 7 years building up this business, which is kind of, you know, all our pride and joy in our lives, and have got it to kind of really good level where we've got lots of employees and lots of revenue, £4 million in revenue, and profitable. And then at the start of this year, we had our biggest pipeline ever, and we're on to hit the best year that we've ever had. And in February, we were doing a deal which was worth £500,000 for us for Mobile World Congress. And 2 weeks before, in the end of February, Mobile World Congress gets cancelled, and we're still kind of trying to chase that money back and see whether we can kind of cover some of that. Mm-hmm. And in the 4 weeks kind of between the end of February and sort of the middle of March, all of our pipeline disappeared. There were no more big events, and there were no more brands kind of sponsoring big events. Even before things like the Euros got cancelled, all of the brands sponsoring it said, well, we're not going to do any fan zones, even if it is on. So we know that business is not going to survive. But I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about kind of the actions that we took in and around that, because obviously it's a massive challenge for a business, and a big challenge for me who's kind of never been through some kind of crisis like this. I mean, nobody's been through this type of crisis. Yeah. People have been through recessions. Yeah. So first thing we did was cut a huge amount of cash. So we tried to get our cost base to as little as possible. Amazing that we've got the furlough scheme from the government, which means that we could put nearly all of our staff on that, and they still were able to get paid to the majority of their salaries, and leave them in a decent enough position. And then we cut all of our kind of other costs, and that got us into a position that even with no revenue, we could get to the kind of end of the year if we got to absolutely nothing at all. So that's great. Second thing was we looked at the business and said, okay, well, let's restructure it. Let's pick out the bits of the business that are going to be successful over the next couple of years, and it's not going to be going to physical events for a good chunk of that. So we picked out some of the digital stuff. We also said, look at all of the debt that we've got with our investors. Let's try and restructure some of that. So we kind of had some big discussions with our investors, restructure it so that when we do bounce back, we're in a position to do it. Because my worry is that lots of businesses over the next 6 months or so are going to amass a huge amount of debt. We're going to have, then as soon as the world starts slowly turning on, they're not going to be in a position where they're going to be able to really be able to pay back all of that money that they owe, and then they're going to.
Can I just ask a question? That when you say restructure, just to be clear, what is it you mean in kind of layman's terms for that?
Okay, so we owed our investors I'm not going to say the exact amount, but we owe our investors kind of a decent amount of money in debt. And so we've made an offer to them to pay back, to give them some cash now, which is good for them, but it gets rid of some of the debt. So it's for a certain percentage of the debt we're paying back now. So we don't have to pay it back at a later stage, but we are using some of our cash and some of the loans that we're able to get to pay back that. So we're not left with a big burden. And then we're looking at our equity structure and our legal structures. So we've kind of got a lot of different investors, and what we want to do is simplify all of that. So we're saying to some of our investors, okay, here's an opportunity for you to buy out some of the smaller investors, so that when we relaunch, there's only 3 or 4 people making decisions. I think that makes it a lot easier for us to kind of spin into different opportunities. Okay. And then the final thing is we started a couple of other different businesses and products. So we're just putting a bit of risk into new products that we think are going to be right for this new world that we see after coronavirus. So one is around home working and creating a kind of social club for home workers. And then there's another one around virtual event environments, where we're creating 3D sort of gamified environments, something like Fortnite, but for a fan zone. So again, you can go to the rugby at Twickenham and you can join the fan zone, and you'll be able to see avatars of all of your different friends. You'll be able to kind of go and do photo booths and things, but all online. So live streaming is not really a very good experience. You just sit and watch a TV. We want to turn live streaming into an actual experience where you can meet people, you can speak to people, you can play games, you can buy merchandise and that type of stuff. So sorry, I've spoken for way longer than I was meant to, but hopefully it gave you a few bits.
No, that was a very good overview. So we do have some questions, and I think maybe one of the first things I would ask, based on what you said, so what does your typical day look like? And I'll take that both as a quick what it was before the lockdown and now what it looks like during a lockdown.
Okay, so I try to get to work at about 7 to 7:30, and I try to get in early so that between 7 and 9 I have 2 hours of kind of undisturbed work. And normally the first thing in the morning is I want to get kind of a project done. So that might be writing a sort of strategy document for the next year or two, or it might be coming up with a kind of new proposal for a client, but it's in my real thinking time, and I have to make sure that I kind of do that every day. And then from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock, it is really varied. Most of the time I would be in meetings. Most of those meetings would be kind of, I try to keep as much of it sort of sales focused, and that's kind of most of my role is sort of sales focused. So I try to keep that on kind of really high level sales, sort of meeting big clients and kind of talking them through kind of later strategy. And then the other bit would probably be internal stuff, so kind of working with the team on their own individual kind of sales strategy, working with the finance team on sort of some of the new bits that we might be doing, or assessing some of our kind of finances, working with our product and development team on new ideas and products, but doing that kind of internally. So I suppose, I mean, it is really, really varied, very difficult to kind of say what a typical day looks like, but the majority of it is going to be split between sort of sales, finance, product meetings. Oh, I think you're on mute still, Alison, so sorry.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Sorry. What skills, knowledge and behaviours do young people need when they start their own business once they leave school? Because that was one of the things that you did that was, I would say, fairly unusual. You set up a business very, very young. You clearly had a different way of thinking to most people you were probably in school with. So what sort of skills do you think was really important?
Yeah, so I think it's really about having a mix of sort of confidence and tenacity, which is really, really important. You have to be the kind of person that is happy to sort of roll with the punches, the ups and the downs, and have that kind of real confidence to sort of have an idea and say, I'm going to go and take it there. Like every single idea is going to have some real sort of downfalls around it. There's going to be some kind of big risks. You're going to look at it and go, okay, well, there's some competition over there. Or you're going to look at it and go, well, what if I don't make these sales, can't make the money? There is no business that doesn't have those kind of risks or downside attached to it. So you've got to have the kind of confidence to do it. But you've got to kind of have that mix of confidence and sensibility that you're also able to know when something is too much of a risk. So that kind of boundary is kind of sort of the kind of key sort of asset around sort of that sort of behavioural side of it. In terms of skills, I always think that the best kind of business leaders are all-rounders. You're never going to be a kind of full all-rounder, but you, as a kind of business leader and somebody who's ready, you've got to be able to kind of be confident and happy to have a conversation with finance people and dip your toes into it and understand those finances, have a conversation and get involved and be happy with product. But I tend to always, if you aren't confident in an area, or you think that's your kind of weakest area, is find one or two people to do it with. So a team of people getting started is always better than just doing it by yourself. So I'd always try and find that. And that there isn't a huge amount of knowledge. School prepares you really well for kind of being well-rounded, having good knowledge of lots of different areas. You'd want to jump into something that you've either got an advantage of because you are passionate about it, or you've been involved in that area of sport or music and you've seen a kind of problem. That's always interesting.
Okay, so, and that's one of the questions, is what gives you confidence? I'm going to assume that that passion and relying on other people who maybe don't have your skill sets is maybe part of where that comes from.
Yeah, I think I think I give everybody confidence in that. That people always talk about running a business being a massive risk. And I actually think if you're a relatively young person, you're going out and you're setting up and running your own business, the risks, if you structure it kind of correctly and you're sensible about it, the risks are actually fairly minimal. So you can get into a position where a lot of the time there is people that are willing to invest in it. You might be investing some of your time, but you can do that in a kind of calculated way where you're sort of, you might be living at home and you might not have some kind of big rent expenses, or you can do it in a place where you've got investment that covers your rent and your area. So don't risk things that you can't afford. Don't put a load of your money in your house and stuff into any of these businesses. And then you should have the confidence that what's the worst that's going to happen is that you spend a calculated sort of 6 months of your time trying to launch something. If it gets to a level where it can pay your salary, that's great. If it doesn't, what have you lost is a bit of time of your life. So I think I would always just kind of look at it long term, look at what the worst that's going to happen is, and say, okay, well, I'm going to put everything that I can into this for this dedicated period of time, because I'm not scared of the failure, and I think nobody really should be scared of that failure.
Fair enough. And if you were talking to someone just about to leave school, what sort of subjects do you recommend that they would focus on if they want to prepare to work in a company like yours? So as an employer, what are you looking for from young people? I think it's an easy way to put that.
Yeah, cool. So I think in terms of sort of subjects, I mean, I always went and opted for the business subjects, and I think that does give you a good background knowledge of some of the things that you'd need to go and talk about in a business. I think the sort of key skills that you'd want from any kind of young employee is that confidence and being able to kind of talk to people. So I'd actually suggest something like drama or I suppose English or public speaking, or kind of some of those type of subjects which just give you the ability to be able to kind of interact and talk to people a bit more. Because every single role, whether you're doing a finance role or a kind of development role or a sales role, you need to get people on your side, and you need to be able to have that kind of really, really good both verbal and kind of written communication. So I'd always suggest those. I think having a numerical brain is also really important for nearly every single role in a business. Even if you're working in kind of marketing, it's very numbers driven. You're working in sales, it's very numbers driven. So I think the core kind of maths and English, plus having some good kind of confidence building skills and things like drama and some education business is probably what I'd look for.
Okay. And I'm going to put two questions in together.
Cool.
Might not actually go together, but we'll see how you answer it. So first of all, where did your love of clothing design come from? And two, what advice would you give to young people wanting to enter creative industries?
Okay, so yeah, actually my parents were proper fashion designers. I would definitely not call myself a fashion expert or designer. I was kind of forced into it every summer holiday, working in my parents' business, and I suppose from that I kind of developed a bit of a bit of an interest and a love and a kind of understanding of sort of how that business worked. I joined Adidas partly because of the kind of clothing, fashion sort of side of it, but mainly more because of sport, which is kind of more of my own personal passion. In terms of kind of creative industries, so you kind of naturally can have some skills in sort of creative industries if you're a designer, if you're kind of if you are sort of if you're creative. I think the key thing that ties all creatives together is your ability to be able to think and come up with new ideas. So you can be the most amazing kind of designer or artist in the world, but if you can't kind of apply that and think of that to a new idea for a marketing campaign or for a clothing design, then you're going to really struggle to really kind of push your skills into different businesses. So for us, we always kind of look and think of people that have got that ability to have ideas. I actually saw one of the questions that's come up was about the kind of post-it notes and things that are sort of,
that was going to be my last question.
well, I'll kind of tie that in, because I think you should all actually kind of push yourselves to think of ideas, whether they're ever going to kind of come off or ever going to do anything, even if it's just looking at, Corona's a really interesting landscape to kind of say, okay, well, what kind of ideas could work in this world? So is there a new business or a new business kind of proposition? Do I look at kind of some of the shops or some of the restaurants that are shut, and what ideas could I give them? And I always kind of stick something up on the wall. So I obviously had to leave the office and working from home. So one of the first things I did was buy on Amazon these rolls of whiteboard stickers, stuck them up all over the walls. My wife is very scared that I'm writing all over the walls, but and that just gives you the ability to kind of free think. So I'd always kind of have topics up there, challenges and things. So I think at the moment on it, we're looking at this home working thing. So I've kind of got something up at the top that's saying who would buy it, and then I'm just kind of adding post-it notes. Sort of say, okay, well, I think the HR managers would buy it, and then I think, okay, well, actually, could it be sold to a different area or a different segment? And then I was looking at investors. So I've got some names of investors that I'm trying to contact, who would be a good research partner to trial it. So it's just kind of having a bit of a clear think is really important. And I think,
and is that constant idea generation part of your core culture of the companies you set up? That's one of the questions we have. What sort of culture does your company have? Is that
really important?
Yeah,
really important is around that kind of idea generation. So we always challenge people that it's not about necessarily coming up with a new business, but it might just be a new way of doing things. We're always challenge people to think differently and to kind of look at the process that we're doing and how can they kind of improve that. So we look at most of the people that work for us as being kind of mini entrepreneurs and employees. Actually, some of the restructuring that we're doing is actually probably going to end up with some of our employees taking more equity and actually owning kind of parts of the business because they are that kind of entrepreneurial characters. So that's yeah.
And just be clear, when you say equity, that does mean who owns what part of the business?
Yeah, exactly. So shares in the business.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Okay, well, that's fantastic. And I think there's certain types of people that particularly get that in my experience. They're very entrepreneurial and they're always coming up with fantastic ideas, and it's good for them to think that they're not necessarily always the maverick. There are actually homes where lots of companies, that's a really sought after skill. So I think that's very good for them. We have a question that I think has come from my boss, actually. So since we're almost out of time, I'll just quickly ask that. What do you suggest for Founders for School from your business point of view? And it's got to be a very quick answer.
What do I suggest for founders from school?
Yeah.
So, I mean, tough to put me on the spot with that, but I think that actually some of the ideas we had about the 3D kind of virtual environment could be a really, really interesting thing that we could do, is actually take employees into some of our workplaces virtually. So if we kind of recreated some of our sort of working environments and then turned it into a bit of a kind of gaming space, and actually there could be a lot of different challenges that sort of some students could kind of walk through. They could maybe sit at a desk and maybe they kind of see some of the challenges that we've got each day and can kind of interact with it. So it would be sort of like a little virtual kind of work placement that could happen, and people could kind of interact with them their own.
Well, actually, given what might be happening over the next year, that might actually be a very interesting thing. We might be in contact. Okay, well, first of all, I'd just like to say a very, very big thank you to you, Dan. That was really interesting, and I hope it inspires lots of people out there. We will be posting this onto our YouTube channel and via our platform later on if anybody wants to share it with anyone that they know. So everybody knows we have another webinar this afternoon where Federico Marchetti, who's the founder of Net-a-Porter, he'll be talking about his career as well. So another interesting link with the kind of fashion and technology, and that's very much how the world seems to be going. So if you're around, please do join us for that as well. So one last time, thank you very much, Dan, and thank you very much for sharing your wisdom. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye. And goodbye, everyone else.